continue to join us. So welcome everyone again. And yes, like Dave said, it's so good to see so many familiar faces and some new faces in there too.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm SF Cameraworks Gallery Manager, and my name is Christina Graber. And on behalf of SF Camerawork, who's hosting this artist panel today, I just want to thank you for attending. SF Camerawork is a membership-based nonprofit whose mission is to provoke discovery, experimentation, and exchange in the photographic arts. And this event today has been made free and open to the public, but we hope that you'll consider joining us as a member if you aren't already one. Erica is going to share a link to this in the area of our website. She's going to share it in the chat in just a moment. So before we begin, I'd just like to go over a few house rules and reminders. We will be recording the entire length of this talk today. So if you don't wish for your image to appear, please turn your video off. Also, we've put all attendees on mute. And if you aren't on mute, please mute yourself and stay on mute until we enter the Q&A portion of the event. This will just help eliminate any background noise. The presenters will first share their work, and then at the end, we're going to open up to all of you guys for questions, and feel free to use the chat area along the way to pose any questions or comments that you'd wish for us to address at the end. And Erica and I and Victoria will be making sure that those are captured. So I hope you'll stick around to the very end for the Q&A and a casual conversation. We'd love to hear from all of you guys today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Dave Elfing, who's SF Cameraworks Interim Executive Director, and he's going to share a few words with us.
Very few words. Thank you so much, Christina. That was amazing and said everything that we would want to say on behalf of the organization. I just wanted to thank you guys again for all being here. It really is wonderful to see familiar faces and especially unfamiliar faces. When we can't get together in the gallery, it's wonderful that we can still get together online. So we will be having more programs like this in the future. Stay tuned. You can always check them out on our website, and we will be sending emails. So yes, please become a member if you're not, and we rely on your support. So I just wanted to say hello. And with that, I want to hand it over to Erica Gentry so we can get this day started properly. Thank you again for all being here.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everybody. I'm Erica Gentry, Programming Chair at San Francisco Camerawork. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Victoria Maria Heilweil, who will be moderating our panel of artists. And thank you, Christina and Dave, and thank you, everybody, for coming. Victoria is an artist, curator, and educator who uses photography to transform subjects that are so ubiquitous they are often ignored and overlooked. She's a detective in the urban environment who seeks out marks, stains, and traces of human presence. Her own work has been included in exhibitions at the De Young Museum, the San Jose Institute for Contemporary Art, Root Division, Pro Arts, Rayco Photo, and many more nationwide. Victoria not only is an artist and an educator, but is an independent curator based in San Francisco. She received her MFA at the California College of Arts and is the curator and lecture moderator for today's program. Thank you so much, Victoria, for pulling together these artists.
Thanks, Erica. I'm a San Francisco-based photographic artist and curator. And I want to give a little background about how the Quarantine Picture Show came about. As an artist, like many of the rest of you, my life changed quite a bit with the start of Shelter in Place. And I had myself a real need to make images. And so I started doing a daily project, which I thought would go till the end of Shelter in Place. And since that's not really coming up anytime soon, I'm stopping at 100 days. So I have 5 days left to go. And so I had this real need to make work, and I started to post it on Instagram. And when I was doing that, I was seeing other artists and photographers that I knew and ones that I didn't know as well, also posting projects that they had just started during this time that they had a need to make, or the ways in which they had to shift their practice to reflect the new restrictions and the new sort of situation that we were living in. And for me, that was very inspiring as a curator as well. And I began to sort of think about how that would make a really interesting exhibition to share what people had done during this time and how people had pivoted or reimagined their practice due to these restrictions. And so SF Camerawork was a wonderful partner in this, in allowing me to do programming for their Instagram, and it's also on their website, and to select 2 weeks worth of programming of projects that would illustrate the different ways that artists were responding to COVID and the pandemic and the shelter in place. And so Rolls and Tubes was one of the projects that I showcased for this, and they're the only collaborative project. And the way that I became aware of Rolls and Tubes was through one of the members, which is Nicole White. She had let me know that they were working on this, and when I saw what they were doing, I thought it was one of the most clever, funny things I'd ever seen, and I love seeing this come up on my Instagram feed. So we're going to show all the links as we go along, but definitely follow them because it makes me laugh so hard. As a photo nerd and somebody who really, really loves photography and lives with it all the time, because I teach it as well as make it, you know, seeing representations of, you know, very well known in many cases, photographs from photo history that I'm sure you all know, and seeing them in toilet paper has been such an incredible pleasure. So I want to thank Camerawork for not only having, inviting me to do the quarantine picture show, but also having the idea of having these 2 panel discussions as a kind of extension of this project. It's been really enjoyable for me to learn more about these artists as well. So I just also want to echo what Christina had said. If you have questions along the way, please put them in the chat, and I promise we will get to them. So I will be introducing each of the members of Rolls and Tubes. They are Christy McDonald, Colleen Mullins, Jenny Sampson, and Nicole White. We're going to begin with each of them showing their personal work that they do outside of Rolls and Tubes. And then they're going to talk about Rolls and Tubes, and then we're going to go to the discussion. And I have lots of great questions to ask them, but I also am very excited to see your own questions or responses to their work. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see their fabulous images. Okay, let me just make sure I have up the chat. You don't. Christina, you're seeing this, correct? Just nod yes. Great. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so I'm going to introduce each of them as they talk about their personal work. So we're starting with Christy McDonald. Christy McDonald, her bio is working in a documentary style. Christy is a Berkeley-based photographer who uses photography as a way to see the beauty in the people, places, and things often overlooked. With ongoing projects in the California Central Valley and the Middle East, Christy travels pretty much anywhere, anytime, whenever possible, seeking to change the way people view the many parts of the world she discovers. So thank you for joining us, Christy.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to share briefly 2 different projects that I've been working on over the years. The first one is more of a documentary project, and that's in Gustine, California. Gustine is a project that started in 2015 when Colleen Mullins asked me to go with her to the town her mother grew up in the Central Valley, to photograph a Portuguese festa. It's a small farming town, and it happens to have a large population of Azorean Portuguese American people. So every year, Gustine hosts this large festa, the Our Ladies of Miracles Festa. It's a big 10-day event with lots of different parades and cow auctions and a semen auction and a cow parade and then they have a huge presentation of the community queens. And I photographed Gustine out of a desire to know more about a part of California that I didn't know anything about, that is about an hour and a half from where I live. It's an area that I had previously sort of written off as being a sort of desolate, conservative, Trumpy, big ag type of place. It definitely still is a lot of those things, but the more time that I or Colleen and I spend there, the more we get to know the people and the more we build relationships and see there's a lot more to it than just what you see off of I-5. So that's it. So these are the pictures. And these pictures are specifically just from a festa, although my interest in photographing this area has grown beyond just festas. It's the whole place and the people and the surrounding areas. The next project is just a little sampling of street photography that I've done. My interest is in the Middle East and in Arab culture and language and history, so it's a sort of a newer interest. And so these are just a sampling of pictures that I've taken there. My goal with doing street photography is sort of, I use my camera as a way of just exploring areas, observing everyday life and engaging with the people. That's it.
And so if you want to learn more about Christy's work, we're going to feature each person's website and their Instagram handle if you are interested in knowing more about their work and knowing more about their projects. Okay, next we have Colleen Mullins. Colleen Mullins is a San Francisco-based photographer and book artist. She holds a BA from San Francisco State University and an MFA from the University of Minnesota. Her work is concerned with incongruous storytelling, ranging from environmentally concerned urban forest management in disaster to the monument removal movement. Which has gained a lot of popularity recently. She has garnered 4 Minnesota State Arts Board and 2 McKnight Fellowships. Her work is in the collections of Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Southeast Museum of Photography, and the United States Embassy, Moscow, among others. Mullins has been an artist in residence at Vermont Studio Center, Penland School of Craft Winter Residency, and In Cahoots Residency.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you also to Erica, Christina, and Dave for helping organize this. I'll tell you when to switch slides. Thank you. I chose to share 2 projects here in the context of what interests me about responding to the worldwide pandemic in toilet paper, as opposed to, say, a more documentary approach, as I think people would call me a wobbly documentarian on a good day. In all of my work, I look at an anomalous thing, the thing about the bigger thing, be it a hurricane or the monument removal movement, as Victoria mentioned, that tells a little bit different story. So slide. These pictures I'm still making after 13 years tangentially about Hurricane Katrina, but it came from an examination of the urban forest of New Orleans and damage that happened to the tree canopy at the hands of man in a post-Katrina environment starting in 2006. Slide. The works as a body, though, show much more about what the trees witnessed, how they survived or didn't. Here, a repopulation from vacancy to occupancy over an 8-year period. Slide. And how they bore witness to things like mass eviction by delay of the African American community, first protecting trees as good PR in a sea of bad, then discarding them when the camera stopped rolling. Slide. And this is my current work. I am now wrapping up in book form. It's called Expositions Are the Timekeepers of Progress. In 2018, in Arcata, California, sentiment rose to remove the statue of the President William McKinley. McKinley was a lifelong abolitionist and served in the Union in the Civil War. In 2019, it became the first statue of a president removed from public view in the United States. Slide. Through the photographs, ephemera, and news clippings included in this project, the viewer learns about the president, the statue, the assassin, and importantly, the community. Though completely unrelated to the record of the president depicted, the robust conversation in the community, a fiery year of debate and mass misinformation, and probably retextured the political environment of this county and led to the unprecedented return of Wiyot tribal land in nearby Eureka. Slide. Layers of history, fake news, innuendo, and activism congeal, bringing together many voices and dismantle what we think we know in the contemporary recasting of the past with a post-colonial eye on history. Slide. I do not take sides in the work. It also includes a social history of the statue, illustrating the constant assaults by Junior League Christmas decorators, cheese and saw-wielding vandals, and college students' rites of passage ascents to the top, often ending in indecent exposure. And these are Post-it notes that were used by the planning department in the lead up to the election to gauge how the electorate felt while keeping the yelling to a minimum, which had become a problem. But I thought the beautiful record of this very commonly stated pro-statue stance of, oh, couldn't we explain it better? And the laser accuracy in the Post-it on the right, Wiyot trauma is not worth your fucking education, read a book, was perfect. Slide. In the United States, the right to gather, to protest is embedded in our Constitution. The last 3 weeks have shown us the world over that despite the need to separate in order to survive the coronavirus, people will raise their voices high. And I'm actually the one who first politicized our feed, according to collective member Nicole, by remaking an Imogen Cunningham into a Mike Pence slide. In the US, we must also exhibit discretion in the quality of information we take as fact, even from our own president, and certainly the history we were taught in school. The story is a snapshot of a community that deeply examined the most fundamental parameters of freedoms through the robust examination of a president who never belonged in this town in the first place. So that's me.
Great, thanks so much, Colleen.
Thanks,
and so
Victoria.
if you want to learn more about Colleen's work, then please visit her website or follow her on Instagram. Okay, our next artist is Jenny Sampson. Jenny Sampson is a Berkeley-based photographer and received a BA in psychobiology in 1991 at Pitzer College. She specializes in the historical photo process wet plate collodion. Jenny has exhibited her work in the United States, United Kingdom, and has been published in Zizifa, The Hand, Shots Magazine, All About Photography Magazine, Visual Communications Quarterly, Blues Review, and the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. Her work is included in the Candela collection and other private collections. Jenny has been a participating photographer for SF Cameraworks Portrait Party and has donated photographic work to their auction. She gave a talk at SF Camerawork about her monograph Skaters that was published in 2017 by Daylight Books. Her follow-up series, Skater Girls, was due out in 2020. Okay, so welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. So I began making tintypes in 2008, and not long after I began making tintypes, I realized I needed to be able to shoot in the field. I had been initially leashed to a studio, and so I built a portable darkroom, and one of the first places I went to photograph was a skate park, and that was in 2010. And I continued to photograph, set up my portable darkroom and photograph at skate parks all over the West Coast for many years. And I would photograph anyone who I could find, but there were very few girls and women. After several years of photographing, I came upon a group of women, and they informed me of an organization called Skate Like a Girl. And I started following these organizations that focus primarily on supporting women and girls in skateboarding. And I knew that I needed to kind of put all my focus on that, because they have been so underrepresented in the skateboard landscape in the history, much like in the photography landscape and women photographers. So I began attending different events and getting to know this community of people. And I just found such an immense world of support and positivity and discipline among these skaters. And I found that in general in the whole skateboarding world. But in particular with the community of girls and women, providing safe spaces for these folks to do this activity, this sport, whatever you want to call it, was exceedingly inspiring. And I ended up meeting just a ton of people who had a bottomless pit of energy and support and positivity. And there's a very, very, it allowed, the process of wet plate collodion also involves a lot of interaction between me and the subjects, and this collaborative spirit kind of was mirrored in their collaborative environment. And it's just been a really fantastic thing to be working on. This book is actually due out in September of this year, so I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And so here's Jenny's information if you would like to see more of her project or learn more about her work and her other projects, or follow her on Instagram. And our last member of Rolls and Tubes to give an introduction to her personal work is Nicole White. Nicole White is an Oakland-based artist, curator, and historian. White uses historical and contemporary photographic processes to examine the medium's varied functionality while looking at the American cultural landscape. She holds a BFA from Massachusetts College of Art and an MA in Art History from the University of Connecticut, and an MFA in Studio from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Recent exhibitions include An Object of Their Own, Perspectives Gallery, MIAD, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Medium, Midwest SPE, University of Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. She is a professor of photography at Diablo Valley College in Pleasant Hill, California. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. And again, like Colleen said, thank you, SF Camera Work, for hosting us. This is really great. I think we all are really excited about the response that we've gotten from the work, and we've just really enjoyed being a part of this collaborative process. So thank you for allowing us to talk about it. So I am going to just kind of briefly show you a few images from several bodies of work. So I'll be the most schizophrenic of the group, I guess. So I'll just let you know when to go to the next image, if that's okay. So a lot, there, stay right there. A lot of my work is about photography and how photographic images are made through light, time, optics, and presentation. I am like a very, very traditional photographer at heart, but I also think about how photography has its limitations and how image making is this very malleable thing. And so my work, while centered mostly around looking at the American landscape, changes from project to project. So this particular body of work, this image here, and then the next few images are from a project entitled Hexi 4096.25. And that title is actually a pirate radio signal in Joshua Tree. This body of work is a reflection upon the idea of signal transmission, the human presence in the desert, and the inability of photography to make a perfectly clear image. So the images themselves are constructed of a wide variety of photographic approaches so as to highlight the ways in which you can articulate or depict a space. Next image. So these images, again, each one varies dependent on how I'm attempting to maybe add an element of interference intentionally within the composition and within the way that I'm utilizing a camera. Next image. Next image. These are from a project that I am still currently working on, and I've been working on it for years, and it's unfolding and changing and just turning into something huge. And it's entitled The Course of Empire Takes Its Way. And the title of this project comes from several paintings made in the 19th century that speak to different states of civilization. The images I'm making are mostly centered around ideas of progress and patriotism, problematizing monuments. So Colleen and I talk about that. Infrastructure, and then histories embedded within landscapes. And I'm still making these images. And so they're again, I'm adding, and the body of work is sort of expanding currently. Next image. Next image. I've also been riding the train. I'm not doing it right now, but these are images from Amtrak. I have been taking the train across the country 2018, 2019, and the beginning of 2020. I've ridden the train back and forth across the United States multiple times each year and have been making images that are about my personal experience of the train. So not necessarily tourist view, not necessarily about the other passengers, but mostly about sort of my experience of being in a little bubble moving through the landscape. Next image. The title of this project is called And Crawl Between, and it's from an Emily Dickinson poem about trains entitled The Railway Train. Next image. And then the last stuff that I have, these are from a project entitled Luminaries. And this is something else that's also ongoing. I am always looking up, looking at the sky, looking at things that are moving in low light, both natural and artificial light, and trying to figure out how I can utilize the camera to compress time within an image or to highlight a particular phenomena that's happening. And so this body of work started with looking at fireflies while I was living in Kentucky, and then it has expanded beyond that as well. Next image. And this is the last photograph. And so this is also maybe a good way to end because it's emblematic of, again, a lot of the things that I think about when I am both trying to engage with ideas of the landscape around me, my personal experience of the landscape, and using photography as a way to encapsulate those experiences. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. And so here's Nicole's website and her Instagram if you want to know more about her work. So now that you have an introduction to the work that they have made, before, during, and we'll probably make after Rolls and Tubes, if there's an after Rolls and Tubes. We're going to switch to talking about their collaborative project, which is part of the Quarantine Picture Show. So their collaborative project, of course, is called Rolls and Tubes. And I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Should we all unmute ourselves?
That's such a great idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, there we go.
Colleen, I was thinking maybe you should be the one to start us off a little bit, just purely because you were the one who maybe got the ball rolling.
And coincidentally, this image has balls in it.
And roll.
like much of the history of photography. So the project comes out of a simple thing, a critique group among women who a couple hours before our first Zoom session in lockdown said, I don't have anything, in a myriad of texts. Are we still getting together? And I said, 2 hours, toilet paper in the picture, history of photography, go. And the first 3 pictures were born. and
this is not one of the first 3.
This is actually one of the most recent ones. This is Jenny Sampson's work, slide. This is my work. You know, I think the work is interesting in, there are a lot of ways to describe it. Parody, parenthetical, referential.
Appropriation.
Thanks. You were on my shoulder, Nicole. But also, I mean, you know, sometimes it's a paraphrase, and sometimes it's a quote, and sometimes it is an inspiration leap. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's wonderful about it, slide, is that we are the wonderful craft of Jenny Sampson. Yes, she has found her inner craftiness. She is our builder. But I would say that as each picture comes up, certainly we've talked about this, it becomes like a motivator for the next picture, craft-wise, to build something. Maybe I'll try building something. That's a really good idea. I'd never thought of that. Wow, I never even would have taken on that picture without a human under there.
And then there's also the component of the titling of our pictures. You know, some are as basic as untitled or self-portrait, but then you have something like this, and then you get to play around and figure out how you could possibly name something with the undertone of toilet paper.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Can we get the slide? Oh, so great. So there's gonna be a lot of giggling. Yeah, and so, you know, it may not be a picture you knew before. And I would say I've learned as many pictures as I've found myself from my colleagues in making this work.
That's been, if I can interject for a second here, that's been one of the sort of most rewarding parts of this process, I think, is that because we are working together through sort of this like show and tell, call and response thing that's happening, you know, we're encountering artists and images that we wouldn't have encountered otherwise. And I think we're also like working outside of our normal mode of working. And so it's been a really great technical challenge for me as well, because all of a sudden I'm kind of free to make images in ways that I wouldn't normally consider. And it opens up new doors and new ideas beyond rolls and tubes, like, and that might filter back into my own work. So that's been really kind of fruitful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And to piggyback onto that too, because
we get the next slide.
Originally we were posting every day, and in order to identify a photograph that you want to play around with and then recreate it within 24 hours, it required, it requires you to just let go of this idea of perfection and all this stuff. And it just is like, all right, find something that you can do and make it happen. And in the beginning of our shelter in place time, you know, we were all trying to figure out how to, like, we were all just trying to figure out what was going on. And this was just such a great distraction. And allowed us to just kind of dive in and just kind of go for it.
Right. And actually, it's nice to stop here for a second. You know, Christy, as much as Jenny works in a lot of the time in this sort of craft-based thing where she is building pictures, or she started off that way, where she was really building environments to make the pictures, absent humans around. Christy is sheltering with her family, and her daughter has become this amazing collaborator within the context of her pictures, in this sort of marvelous partnership.
Definitely. It's been great to work with her on it too. It's fun.
Sorry. I just want to, I would like a little credit for how long, the simplest pictures take the longest amount of time. It is extraordinary. I spent 2 days trying to get Eleanor's left buttock as represented in 3 rolls of toilet, or 1 roll of toilet paper, just a little bit higher, say 4 millimeters higher on the left side. You can change the slide though.
I have to say that's one of my favorite photographs just in general, the original. And so it makes me so happy you did that in toilet paper.
It lends itself well, which is really a huge part of it, is, you know, is the image lending itself to a friendly remaking. This is Christie's.
Oh, that's me.
Nicole. It's just a masterpiece.
This one is amazing.
It's a masterpiece.
Well, I think also, you know, you were earlier, you said something about, you know, this being potentially, you know, we're trying to duplicate something, we're also trying to reference something, or we're inspired by something. And so not all of the images are necessarily like one-to-one comparisons of the original and our remake, but, you know, there's something about being, you know, in this particular scenario, where, and this image was one that I had been wanting to remake. It was in the back of my mind. And, you know, we all have pandemic hair. and so this, you know, became my way of articulating how I was feeling at that moment, along with attempting to achieve our goals of, you know, recreating an image. And so, yeah, this one for me is I think one of my favorites.
And this is Jenny. One of the ones that is like so hard to see it's even toilet paper, Jenny. It's amazing. Just that one little perforation on the right.
Mm-hmm. I have 2 things to say about this. One, it is actually sitting right by my front door. I don't have to water it. It's like a beautiful flower that I get to see all the time. And last night I really wanted to make a Manhattan and I couldn't find my glass. And then I remembered it was sitting by the front door. So I had to use another glass. But yeah, this was, you know, just another little crafty thing. I actually started thinking about making flowers in grammar school with crepe paper and stuff like that, although I didn't realize it until I was actually forming the petals. But I was thinking, wow, like I did this 40 years ago and here I am again.
And this too is Jenny's wonderful Baldessari.
This was, yeah, I don't know what to say. This was one of those moments where I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I had to post the next day, and this Baldessari, I have a little cutout of it on my bookshelf, and I don't know, I just noticed it and then realized, oh, okay, I actually might be able to do this. I don't have to build anything this time. Anyway, that's
And this is Nicole.
amazing.
Yeah, I think
Marvelous. It's
well,
so
one
marvelous.
one of the things we were talking about earlier when we met prior to this was the idea that, you know, we have multiple challenges with this project, and you know, one of the things is figuring out what we can viably make, which omits a large portion of the history of photography when you really start to think about it. But also, I think we're all trying to, again, challenge ourselves technically and think about image making and the reproduction of images. And so for me, the Josephsons were like that. His work when he's making photographs of photographs kind of perfectly fit into this conversation too, because it's doing something where it's repurposing images over and over again. You're very aware of the reproductive component there, but I could repurpose it for us, which was cool.
Yeah, that's me, Erin Sheriff. You know, for me, and Jenny touched on this a bit about like tactics we don't normally use. You know, I am not a person who would have particularly, I liked this show. I saw the show at SF MoMA, I guess earlier this year or last year, but I like this work. I would say I thought it looked easy. It's not easy. It's like so hard. And it's not only is it hard, but it is so goddamn smart. I mean, and I have such a new appreciation for her work because of doing this. And this represented the first time that I actually scanned the toilet paper to make constructions that would stand up a little bit better after fussing for quite a good amount of time with it falling over. I sometimes use my brain. You can switch slides, yeah. This is Christie's.
So great.
This is when I couldn't find the photographers. It was a little bit of a deviation to use just a magazine cover, but they said I could, so I did.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you used a different aspect of photo history, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there is all of this commercial photography and you don't always know the maker of it.
Right. This is me again. Every role is different. Mandy Barker, you know, and here's an example where this is a contemporary photographer whom I adore. And I like not only her work and the way that she represents, I'm not sure if you have her work maybe as the next slide.
Yeah.
Yes. So that she is dealing with this incredibly heavy issue of plastics in our environment. And she has this very funny way of dealing with it by photographing these objects individually and then representing them as gyres in the ocean or representing them as fish schools and things like that. And then she has these very complex titles. I wanted to emphasize her and I wanted to emphasize her issue because it's all of our issue. If you dig around our Instagram, actually, somewhere in the story archives, you can find a video of how you can zoom into the center of this and have like an out-of-body experience. There's so many layers. Anyway, you can go to the next slide. We're announcing here today that we're doing a special limited edition of these 4 images, 15 each, made available to support the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And you can find that on our Instagram feed. It's live now. And there's a link in the bio to make a donation with the details. But with a $50 donation, you can get one of these 4 pictures as long as they last. And there's a deadline, but I can't remember it right now because I'm nervous.
That's okay.
It's on the site.
Great. And I love the selection that you took for this. If you'd like to know more, so thank you so much for talking about rolls and tubes, and we're gonna very soon switch into our conversation, like question and answer part. But if you'd like to know more about my work and my curation as well, that's my website and Instagram. And if you would like to look at all the projects that were in the Quarantine Picture Show, you can find it on SF Cameraworks website here. Actually, that might be the wrong link. Sorry, that's the old one. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all take a look at each other now. You know, I will get to questions that people have posted in here, but feel free to ask questions as we go along, so that it's not only just me asking questions. So I would love to start just by talking about how your collaboration works. So one question that I had is, do you see each other's images before you post them, or is it a surprise to the other three when you post your images? And I think you guys also hinted at this, so you take turns posting, correct?
We do, yeah. We have an order that we go in. And so that's the only thing that's sort of like regimented, is that we submit in a particular order. Sometimes we show each other things beforehand.
It's pretty rare.
I think it's if we have a question about something about the image, or we can't hold back and we want to tell.
Get a little excited.
Generally, we wake up in the morning to see what's been posted. It's a surprise. And it's fun, and we all giggle about it. So.
And have any of you done collaborative projects in the past?
Yeah, well, I mean, Kristen and I sort of work collaboratively, but we're, you know, it's tandem. I mean, I want to emphasize this is a collaborative, but not necessarily a collaboration, right? We're working in our very siloed world separately, to a certain extent, right? Yeah, I mean, we make independent decisions in a certain sense. I don't know. Nicole, you've worked collaboratively too.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some projects in the past with artists, but sort of in the same vein, where we're working under a unified theme, but making our own discrete bodies of, you know, our own discrete pieces. So while we are collaborating in terms of thinking about this one idea, how do we approach the history of photography through toilet paper, we are all doing it with our own trajectory. And sometimes, you know, we bounce off of one another because we see someone's image, we go like, oh, that's interesting. And then we start, you know, doing our own looking. But for the most part, it's kind of emblematic of the time we're in too, right? Like, we are not able to hang out together. And so we are working in these sort of little spaces, and then we cross when we post our images.
And as time has progressed and we've gotten to know the kind of the style of each of our unique styles, sometimes like in our research trying to find the next photograph to emulate, we'll say, oh, this one would be good for Christy, but not me, you know, something like that. So in that sense, we, you know, we're working a little more tightly, but for the most part, we're kind of on our own together.
Yeah, we're more like a support group for people who temporarily lost their sense of humor in a pandemic.
I mean, but we started out as a critique group, and we still are a critique group. And so, you know, this is maybe like, this is just a portion of how we spend our time together.
So Gabby had a question, which is actually part of the questions that I have for you. So maybe we'll switch to her question, which is, how do you choose the images to remake in the toilet paper?
Choose images I think that we can remake into toilet paper.
Yeah, that's primary.
If it's even possible, if we could visualize how we could make it in toilet paper, then it can get done.
But, you know, one thing that we've talked about a lot is actually how we've all re-engaged with our photo book libraries in our own homes. We're stuck here with those resources. And so, you know, that becomes this sort of wonderful exploration where you're kind of going through this book with a totally different set of eyes now, right? because you're looking for something that you can make into a toilet paper picture that will be not inappropriate. Or not too.
Yeah, and for me, the crafty one, who isn't that crafty, like I have to be able to build it, or recreate it in some way, and that definitely puts limitations on what I can do. Photographs that have a lot of circles in them are great.
And so when you're looking for these images, so you talked about your own libraries, but do you also, I mean, how do you search just to find images to recreate? Like, are there specific places that you go, like look online for examples? Like, where do you actually find the source images?
Oh, I mean, I think I could just say like the internet, but I think we look at a lot of museum collections, since there are a lot of collections that are mostly available online, things like that. I mean, I'm not going to one particular source to find the images, but I think we all, because we are photographers, we are very aware of what it means to find a good representation of the thing that we're trying to recreate, and an accurate representation. And so we go to sources that would provide that, whether it's a book that we own or an institution.
Yeah. You know, I want to tail on to that because I've found, like, in particular, the Museum of Modern Art New York has, I mean, it's true of many museums. You know, you can, at any given time, they can only show, what, 3% of what's really collected in their vaults. And so much of this is available online to peruse. It's really remarkable. But this thing too, I want to say, is that I feel like the Instagram algorithm might be some, like, 15-year-old kid in a basement who's, like, shoving things in my face daily into my feed that lend themselves to being worked on in this manner. I can't understand it, because periodically something comes up and I'm like, are you kidding me? Screenshot.
Somebody asked if you take requests, which I think is very funny.
We've had that question from some media people, and we've said no, but we're interested in hearing what you think.
Yeah, who's
So
requesting what?
Yeah, feel free to
They
private message us.
I was going to say, they have an Instagram account. If you have something you would love to see in toilet paper, you can always send them a private message on Instagram. And if they feel inspired, then maybe they'll make your suggestion.
We'll consider.
Also had asked, and I think this is not true anymore. So at the beginning, you said you posted every day. You don't post every day currently, correct?
No.
But there was something that you guys had said, that working so quickly helped you to let go of perfection. Is that something that you think is going to affect your other work or affect your working process going forward?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I as a tintypist, wet plate, you know, on-site photographer, like, I have already had to let go of a lot of aspects of perfection. I mean, what is perfection anyway? You know, I cannot control so much of my environment when I am making my tintypes. Even if I'm doing my still life work at home, and my subjects don't move, they don't talk, they don't have to go anywhere. I mean, it's still, you know, there's a certain level of perfection and that kind of thing that I've already kind of trained myself to let go of. But for this, like, even more, doing something I've never done, trying to build something, I mean, and the work that Christy and Colleen and Nicole do is, I find so incredible. I'm always like, oh my God, I have to make this better. Right. Like, that post was so incredible. I can't possibly do this. Like, it looks like shit, you know? Like, I need to up my game.
I was gonna say, like, expletives are frequently the second thing after somebody sends a text in the morning that says, boom, I've posted. It's like, oh, so good, damn it.
Yeah.
And I will say this, I mean, like within the context of this work that we're doing right now, it was quick and it was easy and it was make another. We all of us were posting every day for a while. And now I'm more careful. Actually, I'm aware that this has become a formidable body of work, a substantive body of work for me. And I give it more careful attention than I did. So if anything, it's just my old habits have just like hopped right back in terms of that.
So I also want to jump in to talk about, like, it's really clear from what you guys are talking about the importance of community, of like having a photo community and how you can inspire each other and encourage each other, especially during this time. And one of the things we talked about in the first conversation was like I also have a critique group, and we actually started meeting more often online. But I think that idea of having community is something that's incredibly important right now when we're all so disparate. And also the other thing that I think is very helpful during this time is having these kinds of deadlines. Like if you do a project that you're posting on Instagram, you have these self-imposed deadlines, and you have to meet them. And it gives you some kind of structure, especially when we're without exhibitions and we're without a lot of the deadlines that a lot of us normally have, or our deadlines have been pushed way out because, you know, even if you were going to have an exhibition, like some of these things have been pushed out a year. You know, residencies are pushed out a year. So this idea of community and deadlines, I think, is a really important thing that you guys have been touching on. One of the things that we had talked about a little bit as a group, especially because this talk was scheduled earlier, and we all agreed that it should be postponed because at the time that it was happening was right at the time of that very horrible death of George Floyd and all of the protests and all of the important conversations that have come up as a result of that. And so, you know, also as a photographer and an educator, right, we've talked amongst ourselves about some of the issues even in photo history and some of the issues in terms of representation. And so I have like two questions. One is, because you're all women, do you think that affects your choices? And actually this was supposed to be for Jenny, but I'll ask all of you, do you consider yourselves feminist artists?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just say yes? Can I just say yes? No.
I mean, you could just say yes. I mean, I consider myself a feminist curator, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I've never thought about it, honestly. I know that I was just talking about being a female photographer and photographing female skaters. That work has definitely made me think more about it. So I don't really have a concrete answer, actually.
That's okay.
I think by virtue of being a woman who makes art and tries to insert into this art world that is so patriarchally based, all women are feminists and feminist artists. Doesn't mean we're making feminist work necessarily. But
I totally agree with Colleen. I think, you know, I spent all of my graduate thesis research, writing about 1970s female and feminist landscape photographers. And so that's something that, it's something that I think is very near and dear to my work. When I'm making my work, I'm not necessarily engaging with that notion, but it's always in the back of my mind that there is this huge swath of photographers that were and still are making important work that are not represented. or not represented enough. And so I think we were talking about this earlier. We're not necessarily like deliberately thinking about every single artist that we select, but I think that we are intentionally using the Western history of photography canon because we want to maybe play with some of the masters of photography through toilet paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you think of it as a feminist act when you make a toilet paper work?
I mean, actually, you're laughing, but you could really connect this.
Yeah, I know you
to
can.
feminist art, right? Because you're working with mundane materials that are part of the home. Like,
Yeah.
I actually hadn't thought about this till right now, but as somebody who has a real interest in this in my own work and my own curating,
Yes.
like, that's
sorry.
really true. Like, this material is feminist material.
No, you're totally right. And we are embracing the notion of taking high art, you know, things that are considered some of the most important photographs made of the 20th century in, you know, traditional photo history, and using craft. And we are smashing art and craft together. And I think that is also a conversation that's embedded in there. Yeah. Colleen, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was going to say was that in the immortal words of the great philosopher Taro Gomi, everyone poops.
So I'm gonna switch gears for a little bit, but we can totally come back to this conversation. So you guys have been very successful in using Instagram as a platform for this work. Do you see it existing in any other format?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say I think absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We actually talked quite a bit, even as we were putting this fundraiser for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund together, which is sidebar now available on our Instagram feed. What we mean by scale, and it was funny that we had never spoken about it, but we all knew that, like, we wanted these pictures to have a relation to their original physical form, because we've talked so much about examining the physical form and discovering how variant even that is within the collection, various collections and museums on any particular picture. So we do plan to do an exhibition of this when it's over. When is it going to be over? But more importantly, we're actually very much spending the summer on putting together a book now. We're very laser focused on being timely and getting this into a format that can be distributed.
I would love a book. I mean, it's interesting because having looked at some of the issues you're going to come up with, so all the original images you're obviously going to have to get rights to reproduce if you're going to include them in the book.
Right. We're yeah, of course we know that.
Yeah.
In most cases, our interest would be just in using the titling. I think it's more fun to ask an audience of a book to think of it when they see the pictures. And it's certainly the way we started this. The first time we put these pictures up and showed them to each other, we just burst into giggles and said, "Is that Diane Arbus?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that joy of, like, did I get it right? That Jeopardy game that it becomes, or match, I don't know which one with the, anyway. You know, so the idea of a book is more of a flashcard paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a little bit about other examples, like if anyone's familiar with the history of photography in pen and ink. But also, it just occurred to me, like Vic Muniz's photographs from Time Life that are made in chocolate, like they're recognizable and we have this connection with them. They're not one-to-one, but we aren't shown them in a comparative manner like that. It's more about having that sort of initial, like, oh yeah, that, and having an engagement with just our version of it.
Yeah,
That would be
Precisely.
super fun. Do you have any, are there things that you've learned about the use of Instagram as a platform that maybe you could share with people?
Colleen is our Instagram.
Oh no, I am leaving that to you three. You go ahead.
We
Tell me
say,
all about it.
Colleen, can you do this, please? And what's the story?
And what is it that I have to say every time something's posted every day? Are there any in progress photos?
Yep.
I guess I developed a system to do one or many in progress images in the story each day, mostly. Sorry, Jenny, I'm gonna hang out to dry here. Mostly because Jenny couldn't figure out how to go back in and edit something one day. And I was like, oh, it's okay, we'll just do it in the story. And for me, the first time it occurred to me that those images were really vital to me, it was just like, somebody has got to see what I did to get Chris McCaw's landscape with 4 rolls of toilet paper hanging from a dowel in my window for 5 days with, burning whole, sometimes you just kind of want people to see, like, it was a little difficult to make. But, in terms of managing the account now, consistently post, does anybody know how that algorithm works? Can we call that kid in the basement that's controlling everything? No idea. But we've been really fortunate that, each and every one of us, and this is true of any group exhibition of anything anywhere, right? If you have a show of 1 person, they bring their people, but if you have a show of 4 people, they bring their people. And so because there are 4 of us, a lot of our friends started following early on, and they kind of shared it. And we've been very fortunate in having the attention of quite a few people, including Victoria, in terms of giving us a little out external media, and that's helped the following. We just exceeded 300 followers. It's really just our gallery, it's a place where we say, yeah, check it out.
So I'm going to ask you guys more philosophical questions, I think, to wrap this up. What role do you think that artists and art making is playing during the pandemic?
So we were also, this has been part of our conversation as well, because if we're speaking specifically to this moment, and to us, art making has been a release. It has been a way for us to examine what's happening around us, but also make something that maybe is a little more cathartic. We can embrace humor in a moment when it's hard to find it elsewhere. And so I think that shouldn't be pushed aside for more serious work necessarily. I think being able to have a sense of humor in a moment of high anxiety and lots of unknowns is actually really critical. But I also think that art making in a larger scope during any sort of moment of crisis is one of those spaces where you can really find true reflection upon the time in which it's being made. And so that for me is that's a really potent thing. So even though we're laughing and cracking jokes and turning this into something that is a positive, it's very positive for us, it's still a reflection of the fact that we couldn't leave our homes, and we're having these other types of conversations that we hadn't had before. So I think that is where it has its real value.
It's a mirror.
Yeah.
Or a window.
I think it's helped make us all feel like we're still being productive photographers too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely thing that I think, you know, there's it, depending on how you make work, being in your home could be very detrimental to your practice. And so it's also a moment of reinvention. And I think that comes with any sort of like crisis or moment where you all of a sudden are limited in terms of what you can do as an artist. So that is actually, I think this has been for me as a landscape photographer mostly, this has actually been a really wonderful way for me to rediscover some other things that I can do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, within the context of our time too, I think that it'll be interesting to see the mass sum of the work created in this time. And I'm trying to sort of go back and see if there were examples in the pandemic of 18, 19, and 20 that did anything beyond the documentation of the hospital or what have you, you know, like I'm curious, you know, about those times. I think we collect differently these days in terms of our museums and archives, and more robustly, and think differently about exhibition. And so it'll be interesting to see all of these things that come out. We also share differently, right? Like, so we know much more about what everybody's doing in their silo this time. I'm excited about that a little bit, to see the lines that people who are, you know, more qualified than I to tell the story of the pandemic draw from all of the different kind of work being created in it.
Yeah. So just a couple of last comments. Somebody said they loved seeing the toilet paper in all your backgrounds. Just funny because I hadn't even noticed that.
We have a winner. Oh.
Somebody asked, it's like, where's Waldo, right? And then somebody asked, are you ever inspired, or do you ever think about reproducing something that's not a photograph, something in another art medium? Or is this really all about photo history?
For me, it's all about photo.
Yeah, I think for this body of work, this project, it's about photo history. Yeah, I mean, would I do it for something else? Yes, definitely. But I think for our parameters, it's the history that we have been the most engaged in as artists.
And we needed some kind of boundary.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as I said in my portion of my personal work, periodically have politicized my images. The Barker image being about recycling, the Cunningham Pence one, I have one coming up that's pretty political. So, I mean, the other things slip into that, but the canon itself as a driving force, and the photograph itself is the fait accompli, is a very much the stability that I needed during all of this anyway, you know. No more things, please.
And somebody else had asked, do you have any philosophical musings on toilet paper that have come out of spending your time and energy with this material and medium?
Oh, so many. I'm so sorry, the time is too short. We just roll with it.
Oh, no.
If you're not also aware of Colleen's other work, she sews, and she's been sewing these very funny series of masks that's on her own Instagram feed. So I highly recommend that you look at those as well, because some of this stuff, if you look at some of their other work, it puts a lot of this into context in this conversation.
Yeah, it does. That's true. I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe that is something that Rolls and Tubes has really done to my practice, is that I started to maybe float out the word interdisciplinarity or a multidisciplinary practice. I used those words on my Instagram feed about a week ago to explain a really big mess in my kitchen. But yeah, I mean, it is, yeah, it all fits together. It all fits together. Sometimes things that don't look alike really do kind of tell a story about a person, right? I hope so.
And I guess the last question I'll ask you that we can end with is, what are you going to take from this experience of doing this project together? What are you going to take forward with you in the future in your own individual photographic practice? Like, how has it changed you, or how has it inspired you in new directions?
I was just coming to a place with the McKinley work where I was starting to invent imagery to create sort of visual sinews between ideas that were in the photographs. And now I think I would be more inclined to find a way to incorporate still life more. It's certainly something I have explored deeply within the context of the toilet paper. So
I might answer this in a slightly different way. It has gotten me to think about some technical approaches to image making that I have sort of discovered and now thinking about incorporating into some stuff that I'm working on now. And that for me has been really useful. But I think one of the things that it has reaffirmed for me is how I need to, as an educator, really rethink, expand, explore basically every venue outside of the Western history of photography canon. It's definitely like we have been using that, you know, sort of as our hunting ground in some respects to find images and see what we can find, you know, pull and reconstitute. And it's a kind of amazing, like we've had this conversation. This is kind of, you know, it is very limited, and it's making me think about how I teach photography and how I'm going to teach it in the future. There we go. Yeah.
Sorry, there's one last question. How did you all meet?
Let's see.
I think Colleen is our main person. So I met Colleen years ago at Photo Americas, which became Photo Lucida. We realized we actually had both grown up in San Francisco, and my brother and she were in the same class in high school. I met Nicole and Christy through Colleen. So,
and I met Colleen at a regional SPE in Tucson. Yeah.
But we were already Facebook friends.
Were we? Oh, okay.
And Colleen and I were introduced by a mutual friend who thought we would like each other's work and interests, and they knew that Colleen was doing something maybe in the Central Valley, and I was interested in the Central Valley, and so she put us together.
Yep.
And I met Nicole and Colleen also at an SPE regional conference that was held in Santa Clara. So, and Erica put up the link for SPE. And how long has your critique group been together?
We had one in-person meeting before this all happened.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Like one and a half. Like 1.5.
1.5. Yeah, but you know, I mean, it is something that's really, I mean, that you mentioned it earlier, that is problematic getting together with people in the normal world. We're much more blocked up in our time. There's the travel, you know, all of that stuff. And so we would like set a date and we'd not do it. And then we'd set another date. And in fact, the one date we did keep was that first date where we went online. We were supposed to be meeting in person. So
and that's when we made our first rolls and tubes. Like
that day,
it all just fell into place very quickly. But actually we've been able, like, we are now in contact constantly. It's really strange and great.
Every single day. Every day.
I believe the text that we got from Christy yesterday is, I walked the dog for 5 minutes. Are there really 50 text messages?
It happens every time. You look away for a second.
So thank you all so much for such a fun and interesting conversation. I really appreciate all of your thoughts about your work and about this project and learning more about it and more about each of you. And again, I want to really thank SF Camerawork for hosting this conversation and this work, and especially to Dave and Erica and Christina for their assistance, technical assistance in putting this together. And I'm going to turn this back over to SF Camerawork to just finish up with any last information, and also remind everybody to please donate to the NAACP and get one of those really great prints before they're gone.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Yeah. Thank you, Victoria. And thank you again, Rolls and Tubes. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Colleen, Christy, Nicole. This was really awesome. I had such a fun time this afternoon listening to you guys talk about your work and to see the work, so much more of it. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, everyone who attended today. It's good to see all of your faces. And to be able to, meet up even though we are in our own spaces. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to highlight some upcoming events that we have at Camerawork that you guys can register for and stay tuned about. We have a talk coming up next Wednesday. That's our next talk. It's on the 24th. Important to note that it's at 4:30 to 6. I think normally on weekdays our talks are from 6 to 8. So this is just a little bit of a different timeline. It's called Facing Life, and it's a community panel with 2 of the artists in our Cell Signals show, Pendarvis Harshaw and Brandon Tausik. And they are going to be talking with 2 of their subjects, Lynn Noyes and Fahim Al-Qadir, about their re-entry project. We're also going to be joined by Keith Watley, who's from Uncommon Law, and Adnan Khan, and he's the executive director at Restore Justice. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're going to put a link into the chat for you guys to register. And then also, we talked a lot about critique groups today and how beneficial they are. And we have our own SF Camerawork critique group coming up on Thursday. And it's going to be with Ann Jastreb, who's on our board and also teaches over at the, or doesn't teach, she's the executive director over at the Center for Photography in Carmel. And we are full to show work at that critique, but everyone's welcome who's an SF Camerawork member to join, to participate in the discussion, to ask questions. And it's a really great way just for everyone to meet and come together. So that is everything from us for today. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. It was really wonderful, and I can't wait to see you all guys all next time.